Wow, I never thought I would tell this story on the net. I'm not even sure of how to type it because it was just so real. Let's see. I was maybe 16 or 17 years old. My grandfather had passed away months before my grandma. He died en route to the hospital, and my mom was with my grandma at the time. Anyway, my grandmother was having a very difficult time with his loss and had become very distant to everyone. It was all we could do to keep her company and try to keep her on the mind, on the present, and not the past. My mother was constantly trying to get us kids over to see her and keep her company. Those of us that drove, she wanted us to visit her on our own. Anyway, one particular afternoon, it was asked of me to visit her, and I didn't. I was a teenager and had other things to do. Anyway, days went by, and no one could find my grandma. She left her things on the dining room table and all of her personal belongings in the house. Then we heard she was found, drowned in the river, and that was the ending to her life. You see, my grandma and grandpa had a beautiful house in the river. Probably a year had passed, and for some reason, my destiny brought me to actually live in their house while I was just getting out of my own, while they were in the process of selling the house. I lived there for the summer of 1985. Many strange phenomena happened that made me a true believer of the afterlife, but one in particular will stay in my mind the most. One day, literally in the middle of the afternoon, I was walking from the kitchen into the living room. I can only recall my last moment of actually being myself, until I had walked through the threshold of the kitchen and the living room. At such time, I only remember walking into a dark, cold freezer. That is what it felt like. I stayed in the dark, cold place until I began to think for myself again. It was at that point, as I was standing in front of these glass doors that faced the river, that I had mixed emotions of not just my own, but also my grandmother's. As I was beginning to see the world again, it was my grandmother's thoughts. I remember standing there, thinking how the river was my savior, and the answer to all my problems and worries were inside the river. Then I knew what it was I had to do, and I was not afraid. The river was going to take me where I wanted to go, to be happy again. Just as I was thinking these thoughts, it scared me, because I knew I was not that kind of person, and whose thoughts was I thinking? It was very quick, and my grandmother left my soul, but from that time on, I really understood what was going through her mind at the time she decided to do what she did. It was almost like she was happy to be telling someone. What she did was not a bad thing. It was what she wanted most in the world. I was happy and scared, all at the same time. She was there, in this house, telling me her life story. Because of this situation, and all the others that she brought to me while I was living there, I believe that a person does not always leave this earth completely, at least until they have been able to explain what they were doing here in the first place, and why they left. This story starts the day we moved to Canberra, Oregon. My father-in-law was gracious enough to let my wife and I stay in the family house until it was sold. The house was occupied by my wife's grandfather until he died, which was about 8 months before we moved in. The family was having trouble selling the house and thought it would be good to have someone to occupy it until it was sold to upkeep the grounds and take care of the property. The house was big to me, coming from our apartment, 2-story and 5 bedrooms, not including the basement. We were both in awe the day we pulled up. The house sits on an acre of land out in the country and was also located directly next to an old pioneer cemetery. It was a little too close for my comfort, actually. When you pulled your car up in the driveway, you actually had to get out on someone's grave. My first night there was sleepless, to say the least. This house reminded me of the house on the Night of the Living Dead. Eventually, I got used to the house and all its creaking and groanings, and was ashamed of myself for being scared. My father-in-law will not talk about his dad. There were some strange things that occurred there, and I'm not sure what. In all the closets, we found clocks drawn on the walls in crayon, with the hands of the clocks in different positions. Not just one clock, but many clocks in all of the closets. Trapdoors and drawers in rooms that were set up to only open with a secret spring latch hidden away. I followed a hidden string that led me to it. I've had the feeling, along with my wife, that the children were kept in closets here as punishment. None of the family wants the house. There are 5 brothers and 1 sister, and will not set foot on the property. I had a bad feeling in this house the day we moved in. My wife did too. She just wouldn't admit it. It was free, so we stayed. For the first 6 months, nothing out of the ordinary happened. Then, everything happened at once. I was awake one night when I heard someone coming up from the basement. Not just coming up, but pounding up the stairs. Every step got louder and louder until I thought I would die with fright. I thought someone had broken the basement window and was coming up the stairs. I jumped up and threw on the light, and they stopped. My wife woke up and asked me what the hell that noise was. I grabbed a bat and told her to call the police. Someone is in the basement. I looked, but no one was there. A little while later, my wife's little sister, who was at the time 20, moved into this house with us. She needed somewhere to stay until she could find a place to rent. She wanted to stay upstairs. There was 2 bedrooms up there. That way, she could have the whole entire upper part of the house to herself. We were both relieved to have someone else move in. The next morning, we awoke to find my wife's sister sleeping on our floor in our room. When asked what happened, she sheepishly replied nothing and left for work. She tried staying there another night, but soon moved all her stuff downstairs with us. When asked why she avoided the question, when I had her alone, she finally admitted that she heard noises in the cubby holes up there. She boarded them up with bookshelves she'd bought, but they wouldn't stay closed. Her stuff was thrown out of the way. She left her stereo up there though. This was the only thing she left up there. On more than one occasion, I was woken up by the sounds of that stereo. The first time I was asleep during the day, I was working graveyard then. It was so loud that I got pissed, and figuring her sister was home and turned on the stereo, I ran upstairs to tell her to turn it off. It was not on. She was not there. This happened for 3 days in a row, and I finally checked the damn thing, and it wasn't plugged in. I foolishly told my wife's sister about this. I say foolishly because she left the next day, leaving us alone again. It was quiet for about a week. I was sitting in the living room, eating, when I heard a sound coming out of the kitchen. I was alone, and it was during the day again. I heard the sound of our cookie jar, the Pillsbury Doughboy. This sound is made when you lift the head of the doughboy off. It makes a mechanical laughter noise. I then heard the sound of the head being placed back on, kind of a porcelain against porcelain sound. Figuring my wife had snuck in and did this. We always thought the noise it made was funny, and pulled the head off once a day or so. I called into the kitchen for my wife. When no response came, I went in to investigate. She was not there. I looked all over the house, figuring she ran to hide or something, but she was not there. When I told my wife about this night, she said it must be that sound, and it went off by itself. I could accept this, except that I heard the sound of the head being lifted off first, then the sound came, then I heard the head being put back down. While I worked graveyard, many was the time when my wife would call me scared to death because of crashing noises she heard in the basement. Things came up missing and reappeared after days in places impossible to miss. We finally moved, soon after buying a house in downtown Portland. My wife waited until we had moved to tell me one last story she had been saving as not to upset me further. On more than one night, she had seen an old man visit the graveyard next door. He wore an old leather hat and had an old clothes similar to those worn in the pioneering days. He carried an old leather pouch and would just stand there in the graveyard, staring at our house. When he would leave, he would walk down the middle of the street. My wife got in the car to follow him, but around the corner, he just vanished. He always came, but you never saw him coming. He was just always there. After a while, she stopped looking, afraid of his blank stare. It was like whatever had lived in the house knew we were getting ready to leave. Well, that's it. Hard to believe until something like this happens to yourself. When I was 9, I had my first paranormal experience. After about 3 years of living in a brand new house, and about 6 months after my sisters and I messed around with a Ouija board, I woke up one night at about 2 a.m. and the air totally levitated off my bed. I felt 2 hands grab me, then slam me down on my bed. I really thought nothing of it. I thought it could be a dream, but I did sleep in my parents' room after it happened. After that, I would ask my mom if our house was haunted. She would always say a new house can't be haunted. A few months after that, my second older sister would complain of hearing her name being called. About 4 years later, my parents divorced, and I went to live in an apartment complex with my dad. After about 4 months of living there, I woke up one night, saw my closet door open, and an image of a man walking out. Then the image faded away. I was scared. Then one more came. Voices. I would hear gunshots late at night, but my dad would not hear them at all. 1 year after that, we moved to a 60-year-old cottage house, the house I'm currently living in as I speak. My first experiences were of shadow people going along the walls, and yes, I was very scared. About a couple weeks later, my dad and I were fighting in the family room. Then, the ceiling fan just cut on. At the point of anger I was in, I was not scared. After about 4 months of those experiences, more came. Knocks on the wall, more voices. Around that time I developed an anxiety disorder from all the fear I was going through and went to a Christian counselor. Then, after it got worse, glasses falling on tables, loud noises at night, she came by to command the spirits out of the house. For the next 2 weeks, nothing happened, but now, on this day, March 16th, 2000, we are hearing the noises again at night. Lucky enough for me, I've been taught how to ignore and not to be in fear of those things that are going on. Around the end of April, we'll be moving into a brand new house again. I guess we'll have to see what happens. My husband was sitting at the dining room table one morning about 6 months ago. Now, my husband does not believe at all in the paranormal. He noticed the cat staring up at something at the doorway going down to the basement. He looked down to pick up his coffee cup, looked up, and saw an older woman dressed in old-fashioned clothing standing at the entrance of the stairs. She was motioning with her hand as if indicating him to go downstairs. Needless to say, it scared the life out of him, the non-believer. I got up shortly after this and found him white as a ghost. It's the first time he's ever admitted to seeing a ghost. Our house has many strange happenings. A couple was living in our basement for about 4 months, and every night something strange would occur, from the TV going on by itself to animal growls and sounds of animal claws on the floor. I myself am a converted believer in the paranormal, having witnessed many strange sightings. Would like to share some with the other interested individuals in the near future. Thanks for creating a site for people like me who love ghost stuff. My husband has been cleaning this church for 3 years, and he, as well as the rest of our family, has experienced some very strange things. First, it was just a feeling of a presence that you just couldn't shake, a glimpse of a shadow from the corner of your eye, and the occasional sound that could not be explained. My husband worked his regular job from 4 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. and would go out to the church after leaving his job, and that was when he would experience most of the things. Then, it didn't seem to matter what time of day it was, and it even started happening when the kids would be there helping. Our 2 boys are now 9 and 12, and we never said anything to them for fear of scaring them. There was a time where they were all in an upstairs room, and they were cleaning, and suddenly, the piano started playing one note over and over for a minute or so, and then it stopped. The boys were very frightened, but also very intrigued by the whole thing. I've been a victim of Henry, as we affectionately call him now. I've heard many things, little bumps and unexplainable noises. Our 19-year-old son took over the cleaning job for about 6 months this past summer, and he has also heard many things, like footsteps in front of him, doors on other floors slamming when there is no one else in the church. He also went to clean in the middle of the night, mainly because it is easier to do when no one is there to get in the way. Or so we thought. When my husband took the job back over, it wasn't very long before he would start experiencing Henry again. Oh, did I mention that he would always seem to find dimes lying in the oddest places, sometimes as many as $2 worth in a few hours of cleaning. We never felt like we needed to fear Henry, since his presence never seemed to be a threatening experience, but there was a woman who has been a longtime member of the church, and she was there one day by herself, doing the books, when she had heard moaning to the point of causing her to call the police because she really felt that someone was there. My husband had arrived while the police were in the building. They had asked the woman to wait outside in case they found someone, but needless to say, there was no one to be found. They kind of humored the woman, but my husband told her of his experiences, and she said this wasn't the first time that things have happened to her there either. The most disturbing thing was when he was in the boiler room, cleaning some mops before he left, and me and my 2 sons were outside warming the car, and suddenly he came running to the car with a horrified look on his face and shaking tremendously. I could tell something was terribly wrong, but he didn't want to frighten the boys, so he waited to tell me. After we were able to be alone, he had revealed to me that he actually saw 2 men walking down the stairs in the back of the boiler room, talking to each other as if he wasn't there at all. They were dressed in the style of the 20s and seemed to be almost floating down the steps. There is no way to enter the room from that door, since it is locked very securely. We have had many of the people we have told these things to try to explain them away, but there is no human explanation for these things. There have been times when we have went there and left, only after a few minutes, because there is a sense of something just not being right. I come from a family that my mother and sister have always had experiences similar to this in their lives. I've also had times where I knew the other side is present in my life. My 4-year-old nephew had come with us one day, and the children were all playing with us in the preschool room for about an hour. The next time we took my nephew, which was only the second time he had ever been there with us cleaning, they were in the gym, playing, and he came out in the hall and asked us where the big fellows was at. I was shocked that he would say that, since the only people on both trips he had made with us was us. I didn't want to frighten him, so I just said, "What big fellow would that be?" He responded, "You know, the big fellow that was here the last time we were playing." Well, I felt that this is really all that needs to be said to explain just what or who is in there at this church. A child that doesn't know what we have all experienced can hardly imagine the same thing if it isn't so. Outside of southern Columbus, Ohio, there's a small town called Georgeville, Ohio. We bought a home there that had been remodeled. The original home was added onto, and the original was of a log cabin of Civil War days and owned by a major from Civil War days. Also, from day one that we moved into this house, we started hearing and seeing things. We also had a bad smell that lingered no matter how much we cleaned. In the basement of the new part, we had a pool table at night. You could hear the pool balls being struck and knocked into the pockets of the pool table. We had 3 small children who would not sleep in their rooms, saying their beds rocked and moved, and they were lifted up and turned around by someone they could not see in midair above their beds. We had a big old piano. It would wake you up by playing by itself. Also, around midnight, a couple of times a week, you could be in bed asleep, like in the winter, even with the store windows in and windows closed, and a loud sound of breathing, like a huge animal, would run a long way, would run by these bedroom windows, and it would be so loud. It would sound as if it were in the bedroom with you, exhaling and inhaling, deep and raspy sounds, and a hard, running sound. There was deep snow and drifts piled under the outside windows, but when we went outside to look right after hearing this past our windows, there was nothing there, and no prints of any kind in the snow at all. We sold this house and moved to northern Ohio. To this day, I'm still not sure what I can make of this incident, but I appreciate you reading. Thank you. Hey guys, more doozies for you coming in with this narration that you can enjoy for the rest of your life until you pass away. See, I used a euphemism. Instead of saying die, I said pass away. So, by default, that makes me a good person because I'm thinking about saying nice things. Or, political correctness is not a good thing, and you should just speak your mind and say that you died when you read this video. That doesn't even make sense, guys. Okay, I'm done. That was the most goofiest laugh I ever did in my life, but I'm gonna keep it in because that was weird. And anyway guys, be sure to share this video all across social media platforms such as Facebook and the such. They help me to, spread the word of my channel so more people can get more stories that are unique and refreshing and new and, all that good stuff. And like I said, it might help me to stop slurring my speech and actually make sense, but, I'm not counting on that, but just to let you guys know. Also, you can like this video, you can comment, especially comments, because I want to hear what you guys think of these stories, I think they're really cool, but then again, it's me, I have a bias, and I always think these stories are cool because I'm making the damn video. Okay guys, anyway, love you as always, good night, good morning, and I'll definitely see you in the next video. Toodaloo, and bye-bye.